Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we ask guests to tell us your story. Hello there, this is Dr. James W. Smith, your host. We seek to transform lives by encouraging and inspiring. Someone encouraged and inspired this host, a former lawyer, gambler, inmate, and his life was transformed. The same can happen to you. When you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please support this ministry with a donation or a monthly recurring amount for as little as $3. Want to give a shout out to Reverend Quincy Davis for his support to the Deal by Me podcast. Check out my encouraging, inspiring, and transforming books. I'm available for speaking engagements, in person, and virtual seminars. So please contact me through my website, www.dealbyme.com. I have with me Russ Haddad, uh, who has had a full range of life experiences, starting with the death of his father when he was 12 years old. When not writing poetry, he is the business development manager for the North Carolina Craft Brewers Guild. His professional background ranges from marketing, operations, through a variety of positions in radio, journalism, tourism, economic development, and a series of public service positions. I'm excited to have Russ come and share with uh, this podcast, and I know you as listeners are going to enjoy listening to what he has to say. Russ, it's good to have you with me today as we share in this podcast. And would you please tell us where you are being interviewed from, and share
Sure
with
thing.
us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. James, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure being with you today. I really do appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. And I'm here in my new home in Durham, North Carolina. Just recently moved here a couple weeks ago from Chapel Hill. So I've been in North Carolina for, 23 years. Most of that time has been spent in Elizabeth City. So I spent 20 years there. Um, Actually got married in 2013, so it's my 10-year anniversary in 3 days, in 4 days, 4 days. So my wife Margie and I, we actually did a commuter marriage for quite a bit, for 7 years of that 10 years, and I was commuting back and forth from Elizabeth City because of a variety of jobs, and one with Congressman Butterfield, and then with Elizabeth City State University. So I was kind of busy doing that. She works for the Environmental Protection Agency here at the Research Triangle Park, doing communications and public affairs. Um, I'm originally from Massachusetts. That's where I grew up, in Worcester, Massachusetts, and went to school there and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of local. And then um, I got down here in North Carolina by way of I was a newspaper reporter looking for a job in Elizabeth City. Happened to be the place where I landed. Um, and I moved here with my first wife, now ex-wife, um, and then just kind of we stuck here,
Okay.
and series of things going on, and went through changes in my life with that relationship. Kind of had a rebirth of relationship with my current wife. We have a son. Who's living in Boston now. So I still have that Massachusetts connection, as well as still rooting for the Massachusetts New England sports team. So I couldn't get that out of my system.
I got you.
Um, but currently I'm working for, as you mentioned, the North Carolina Craft Brewers Guild. Um, so it's an interesting job. It was kind of one of those things where during COVID, I was kind of a couple of things happened. I got laid off from Elizabeth City State University. That's when I decided that we consolidated households, moved here to Chapel Hill
Mhm.
at that time, and and kind of fell into this position with the Brewers Guild.
Okay.
Really, I kind of work with the brewers and kind of build their economy and the ecosystem around that, and try to provide an impact for the state of North Carolina through that industry.
Okay, well, Russ, it's exciting to have you come and share with the listeners of this podcast. I'm telling you, one of the first things I've got to ask, because when I looked at your profile, I'm trying to figure out why and what's the reason. But I note that you say you're Russ Haddad, also known as A.A. Winston. Now, you know, I got to ask you, I mean, why are you known as A.A. Winston? I got to ask that question because that's important to me.
Absolutely. That's a great question. It's a perfect question. So really what that was the second thing that happened during COVID. I've been writing poetry since I was a teenager, kind of going back to, it was kind of a coping, and turned out being a coping mechanism for the passing of my father, and dealing with that. Then I kind of continued doing it through my college years and professional life and marriage and divorce and meanwhile, there's death in my lifetime, with family members and close friends and things like that. So it kind of became just ways for me to kind of deal with things, but it kind of lay dormant for quite a while. And then COVID hit, had some time on my hands, and I was looking through boxes and discovered I had quite a few poems there. So I kind of compiled them, and it's like next thing it says, well, what do I do with it? And I kind of got up the courage to say, hey, let's publish it. So A.A. Winston comes from when I was doing poetry. For some reason, I created the name A.A. Winston because I thought it just sounded like a poetic name.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and that's kind of my poetry really started when I was doing it for the school newspaper, my high school newspaper. And I guess maybe part of that, the pen name was, I was embarrassed as a kid. As a teenager, you get embarrassed about writing poetry and mushy stuff, and kind of showing your feelings a little bit, especially maybe as a male. We kind of have that thing about us, maybe, I don't know, but so I adopted this name, A.A. Winston. It has no real connection to really anything other than I just thought it sounded like a cool poem, a cool name for an author. So back in earlier this year, I self-published a book called Growth, which is basically spans three phases of my life up until I was 53 years old, 54 years old. And it really kind of covered my immaturity, which was kind of my teenage years into college years, maturing, which was really kind of the whole beginning of my professional life to starting a family, and then
Okay.
kind of going through the hardships of losing a marriage,
Mhm.
going through a custody battle, and everything like that.
Okay.
And then the last phase was continued maturity, which kind of basically is that's where I was at that point. I had written some new stuff, new material during COVID, so I kind of pulled that in. But really, kind of the message of that part is there's still more to come. I kind
Okay.
of rediscovered myself, and
Okay.
that was kind of at the end of that phase. At the end, growth kind of takes me to an ending point, but also a starting point.
Okay.
So I kind of at that point, I just kind of need to purge all that writing and just kind of put it out there, and just whatever the reaction is. And I'm not saying that everything,
Right.
all
I
those
get.
poems were great or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of a cathartic experience for me.
Okay. Well, let me ask you now. When you talk about growth, is is the collection of your poems called Growth? And just curious, because I'm gonna give you, the opportunity to share where folks can get it all from. But as we're going through this, is this a combination of all of the poems? Are you calling it Growth, or is Growth just the title of a particular poem? Uh, what? I guess I'm just trying to figure out the growth part and
Yeah, I mean,
what made you write it.
you're right. It really was when I was looking through the collection, and I realized they were different parts of it, and I grew. At least I felt like I had grown
Hmm.
through these different stages of my life. in
Okay.
that it just seemed like that was the appropriate title. Um, that I at least I noticed that through one period I had done certain things, then it kind of segued into another period of life, and then to the final period, the continuing maturity part is like, okay, this is where I'm at now, um, and I've been through so many different experiences, good, bad, and for better or worse. Um, and I learned a lot of lessons through that period. So a lot of that writing is about those experiences, and the hope is that these poems are relatable. I'm not the only one who's gone through these experiences. So I'm hoping as people read these poems, they can see that they're not in it by themselves.
Okay.
And I believe they're relevant, and really at the end is kind of a rediscovery of
Okay.
of, of writing, but also just kind of a refreshing starting off point
Okay.
to another stretch of my life.
Right. I can identify with that. Very much. If you had the opportunity and talk with GK, he can share little bit about um, you, a little bit to you about my life.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I wrote, and when I wrote my books, it was from the same kind of experience. It was a lot of therapy. So I'm trying to,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get through what you want to, what you're getting through, and to write about it always helps you. So I know exactly where you're coming from. I want to get a little clarity uh, from the standpoint of the poems themselves. Now, are you writing? Is it a selection of poems under one name, Growth? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Basically, yes, with
Okay.
subsections of these three different phases.
All right. Now I
Correct.
got
Yep.
you.
You got
Okay.
it. You got it.
Okay. Okay. That's what I wanted to
You
find
got it.
out. All right. Now, I take it that a lot of this was to kind of be therapeutic because of what you were going through. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely, yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Putting words on paper was really a way for me to kind of work through a
Okay.
lot of these situations and circumstances. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I'll assume then that when you wrote Growth, there was something about it that you want to accomplish. So, what do you hope readers get from it, from your your poems? That's under this label of growth. What
Mhm.
are you expecting them to get from it?
You kind of have it on your T-shirt.
Okay.
Little bit of inspiration.
All right.
I again kind of going back to um, people to kind of understand and learn that um, they're not the only ones that maybe gone through these situations, and that um, there's other people going through it, and maybe that just helps them through that,
Mhm.
inspires them to kind of keep pushing forward,
Okay.
um, and encouraging people to kind of that it's you're going to go through things in life. Um,
Okay.
you can't always get too down. Um,
Hmm.
you just got to kind of keep persevering, and I think you're going to come out of it at some point, and that's kind of I guess the underlying theme is that yeah, there's good things that happen in life, bad things that happen in life. How
Hmm.
you handle them, sometimes you got to let go, to what's going, some of those bad things. But in the end, you can come out a better person,
Mm.
and it really can help you and transform you into the next phase of your life.
And I'm excited talking to you, Russ, because I know and can feel exactly what you say. Having gone through uh, some trying and difficult situations in my own life, and writing my books, it's what you're saying, you know, touches me and it reaches home because it's so real. So I'm, just talking with you is amazing, and is a relatively, intriguing just to share. And so I see where you are. I am a retired pastor, Uh, I I practiced law for some years, and got into some, was gambling, and I lost my license. And of course, I guess that's GK was a
Hmm.
lawyer. We all went to the same school. That's how we know each other so very well. And after got we were practicing law at the same time together. So we became very good friends. But I messed up. I had a gambling problem and lost my focus. But I was called to a church and started pastoring and pastored for actually about 3 months short of 33 years in the same church. I just retired. And what I wanted to do before I retired, I started this podcast because I wanted to keep my ministry going,
Hmm.
and to hopefully encourage, inspire, and hopefully transform lives. That's because of what I'd gone through. It made me want to do something like that. So I'm understanding exactly where you are. But one of the things I said I wanted to do was to ask every guest who I bring on the show, and because guests that I bring on are those who have gone through some amazing experiences. They have written books. They have, they're in the coaching business. They're doing all of this. And I say, if there's somebody out there, someone who will listen to uh, this podcast, and there are some out there. I get, these emails saying that I was going through something, listen to your podcast, and wow, it really helped me. So, could you say to these individuals who will maybe feeling down and low, going through some difficulties in their lives, having some problems, what would you say to them that would give them an encouraging, inspiring word that could perhaps bring about transformation?
I think the big part I could really say is that yeah, there are times that you're going to be down low.
Mhm,
We all experience those times,
mhm,
um, but you really do have to be persistent and
mhm,
always you know and put your faith into something that's maybe bigger. I mean,
mhm, mhm.
there's I truly believe, and you have to make connection. I think that's the other part. I think a lot of people kind of withdraw when they were in those
Right.
moments, and I know I did. I got to a point where I didn't really want to be around people because I
Mhm,
didn't think people wanted to be around me,
right.
if that makes sense.
Mhm,
Um, but and part of it was just forcing myself to kind of be there, and maybe I did that through pouring myself into my work and things like that. Um, but then also discovering that stopping and looking around, saying, "Hey, there's things in my life, like my son, or other relationships
mhm,
that um, that I'm proud of and are positive, and just kind of take baby steps. It's one thing at a time."
mhm.
And I hope that doesn't sound cliche,
No,
and
no.
maybe it does, but I truly think that you gotta maybe sometimes take a step back and just realize um, that yes, now seems to be bad, but just kind of don't lose sight of what's around you because there's a lot of things that I'm sure we all could, and I think what you said perfectly is that you lose focus. I I
Mhm,
I think that says it all.
mhm,
I lost focus like you did at one time,
mhm.
and you have to you know allow other people to help pick you up too. Don't be
Okay.
afraid to ask for help, and let other people in, but also let go. I mean, my ex-wife, I had a lot of animosity towards her and kind of what we went through with divorce and custody and everything like that. And um, but at some point, you know, my son is a great person. He's
Mhm,
24 years old. He's got a job. He graduated from college and everything like that. And I have to admit, she helped raise him.
mhm.
Whether whatever we went through, she and I we created a wonderful person.
Okay.
So So I think it's building on finding that one positive and just kind of continuing to build it
Right.
little by little,
I
and
understand.
don't get too overwhelmed.
I understand. I hear you very well. That's very good information, and I know that listeners of this podcast will take that in, and I appreciate you sharing that. Listeners, don't go any place because Russ is going to come back and still share with us a little bit more of this inspiration that I'm getting from him now. Uh, but before we do that, I want to ask Russ to share with listeners of this podcast where they can get more information about you, Russ, your poems or
Mhm.
anything else that may be of help to listeners of this podcast. Will you do that
So as if
at this time?
sure, sure, a few ways to do it. You go on my Facebook page, AA Winston. I kept the pen name for that one, or you can go on Amazon.com or in BarnesandNoble.com. You can get information there, and I do have a website, RussHaddad.com. It gives you information about me, the book. Um, I know for the Facebook, there's postings of different sampling of my poetry. They kind of give you a good flavor of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then if you like it, feel free to order it on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com.
Okay. Okay. Good information. Thank you for sharing that. I was looking at your profile, and one of the things that's kind of stuck out with me because it happened to be, and you made the statement. You said poetry became your form of coping through life's ups and downs. I understand that perfectly. I know exactly where you're coming from. And then you said reinvigorating that love during COVID pandemic. Are you saying that during the COVID pandemic was a time you had a chance to kind of reflect more because you couldn't do anything? You were just in, and you started to even do more writing of your poems, or just started reflecting more? Where were you coming from with this?
That's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, I had it. When you're working every day and you're kind of pushing through, and especially through COVID, it was kind of a weird time. And then when I got laid off, I was able to take that step back and
Mm-hmm.
take a breath, and really reflect on where I wanted to go next.
Yeah.
Um, I'd kind of been through, just job. I was worn down, just a lot of stuff going on, and and then that's again, I kind of looked at kind of what I had. I started exploring just kind of what was in front of me,
Mm-hmm.
and the poetry. As I was kind of cleaning some stuff up, I found notepads and of past writings, and like, oh, okay, let's look through this, and like, I decided maybe I take a chance,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe just do something that I had been wanting to do for decades. I mean, this poetry book spans about 40 years of my life, from teenager all the way to middle age, and I've always wanted to write a book, and it wasn't necessarily a poetry book, but when I saw that I had the material, um, yeah, I kind of polished them what I had already done, and I just kind of like it gave me new inspiration and create a new catalyst for me to write more. And I kind of had kind of a writing frenzy to a certain degree that's continued all the way through to this day. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
um, it just I kind of like using words and kind of putting things together that way. I always have, even since second grade. I've kind of been doing some sort of writing,
Okay.
um, and this COVID really did give, for all the bad that was going on with COVID. Um, it gave me an opportunity to stop, pay attention, refocus, and then really kind of reflect and make sure, and really for me to revisit kind of what I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
in the later stages of my life. And I'm 55, and I got hopefully I got a ways to go.
Yeah.
But I really, even with the job at the Brewers Guild, I just wanted a different feel and tone with
Hmm.
what I was doing, and then kind of how I can utilize doing more stuff in the community
Okay.
as well. So in Durham, I hope to get more involved with what's going on out there. Um, it just gives me a real opportunity to kind of choose that path.
This is exciting because I know exactly where you're coming from. You know, I've written 3 books, but the one that I wrote, which is a second edition of my first book that I wrote probably 15 years ago, but it was during COVID, uh, that I had a chance to sit back. Couldn't go to church. You know, we did it online. You know, Zoom, and I was just at home. And so I decided that I was going to get back into writing. And that's when I wrote my second book, which is a second edition of my first book. But when you talk about what you do during those times where you're just sitting around, give you a chance to think, you know, to reflect, and they're really precious moments. So I know exactly
Mm-hmm.
where you're coming from with that. As we bring this to close, let me ask you this: what did publishing your work mean to you? I mean, you know, you obviously you have done it, done these poems, and so is there something about it that you can take away, or that you will let us know, how it
That's a great question,
affected you?
actually. I really think that the takeaway was yes, I could do it.
Okay.
Um, it was one of those things where you kind of run through your brain over the years, like
Hmm.
regardless of whether anybody reads it or not,
Right.
or buys it or not.
Okay.
The simple fact that I was able to compile it, put it together, and get it published, and just have the opportunity for others to experience it and see it and read it. Um, and for me, I'm fairly introverted. I grew up shy, and I was a very bashful person. And even now, I mean, I do a lot of people work with my
Hmm.
job, um, but it's showing a different side of me. This book, and that's having the courage to be able to show that, meant a lot to me. Um, and I'm just proud that I was able to kind of get that courage, to be able to do that, and it makes me feel good, and it makes me feel good that hopefully other people can read it now, and hopefully it expresses what other people are feeling, and they can connect somehow.
Wow. Wow. Well, Russ, thank you so much, and there you have it. Russ Haddad, also known as A. A. Winston. I love it. I love it. He rediscovered his enjoyment of putting words to paper to express himself, and decided to publish his works to share feelings in hopes others relate. What a great and powerful story you've shared with us, Russ. And again, we want to thank you for coming on the Deal by Me podcast. And
Thank you very much.
until next time, peace and blessings to each of you. Again, thanks, Russ.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.